All right, welcome in everybody. My name is Kevin Mills, and today I'm going to be breaking down the first episode or the first chapter of Spy Family. Not necessarily what is happening. I'm not going to necessarily summarize it. This isn't also a reaction video too. I've already seen this before. I've broken it down on a very minuscule level. I'm going to be, again, breaking down this episode in the sense of a writing perspective. If you want to write, or if you just want to learn about writing or tips and tricks, you can use this video to see what is going on at play behind the scenes and maybe take some tips and tricks for you. This video is designed to be more informative, to be able to learn what's going on and be able to implement it yourself. So there will be some prompts at the end of it all in case you want to try and see what's happening in Spy Family and then make it work for yourself similarly for your own styles. So I wrote a script, which I'll be reading from. I tend to go on a lot of tangents and I start to lose focus when I go too heavy on any one of them. So in order for me to stay focused, I decided to just write a script and I'll read from it. So in my script, I'm going to summarize real quickly parts of the manga. If when I get to those parts of the manga, I'll just come back here and just try and show it. So chapter 1 is essentially mission 1. So I'll just leave it here and I'll start with the prompt. Here we go. Perhaps the best way to begin understanding how to write Spy Family Operation Strix, from its characters to the setting and its moments, is to understand the Save the Cat plot structure. Although this plot structure, originated by a screenwriter named Blake Snyder, was originally for roughly 90-minute movies, it's been implemented into several other media types, including novels, screenplays, and, as we'll observe here, comics and TV episodes. Whether this was intentional or coincidental instinctive genius, the story follows this plot structure almost to a T, and I'm going to show you how. So, the Save the Cat plot structure is first split into 3 acts, a session by which is defined by the relationship between the main character and his world or environment. Act 1 will show the old protagonist, a protagonist who has yet to learn the story's lesson or theme, in the old environment, or an environment in which the main character is used to. Act 2 will show the old protagonist in the new environment, or an environment in which the protagonist isn't used to. And Act 3 will show the new protagonist, a protagonist who's learned the lesson or theme, in the new environment. Between the 3 acts, there is a total of 15 beats, as they're called, or distinctive periods of time with events that progress the narrative in a distinct way. I'll explain each beat as we come across them and how the episode has implemented them into its own story. Additionally, as they become relevant, I'll break down other points, tips, and tricks that I've noticed. With that said, this video assumes you've already seen the episode or read the chapter. Everything will be spoiled. You have been warned. Again, I'm going to be breaking down everything in the episode to very small, minute words and what those words are doing in an overall scheming of things. So I'm going to cut down here. I'm going to explain every act and beat as we come across it in my script. So if you want to pause and try and see everything I just scrolled through, be my guest. I wrote that myself, but I'm going to start here. So Act 1 of the Save the Cat plot structure has 5 beats: the opening image, set up, theme stated, catalyst, and debate. And as you'll see here, as we come across each beat, I will explain what the beat is and where the beat is in the chapter or the episode. So, first beat, the opening image. The opening image, which is usually the first percent of the story, acts as the hook while also setting the story's tone, type, mood, and or scope of the story. Basically, it sets the story's genre. For this opening image, it happens in seconds. 2 men in a car comment about going to an embassy, the car brakes malfunction, the car drives off the road, and is blown to high heaven. Actually, let me do this so you can see this. So, that's perfect, actually. Read mode. Perfect. Okay, this is so much better. Okay, so Okay, I'm gonna read this one more time. For this opening image, it happens in seconds. 2 men in a car comment about going to an embassy. The car brakes malfunction. The car drives off the road and is blown to high heaven. You can see this all right here. All of this, these 3 panels, just simply these 3 panels are the opening image for episode 1 or chapter 1. So, as short as that is, that's the opening image. What did it do? First off, it used the narrative technique called a cold opening. A cold opening jumps us straight into the story before anything is explained. This technique is used to grab the viewer's attention with the scene and arouse the question, what's going on? This contrasts with an opening image that explains what's happening first before beginning the story. A good example of this is shown in the Star Wars movies. Neither technique used in the Star Wars movies or here in Spy Family isn't necessarily better than the other, it just accomplishes different hooks. Whereas a Star Wars movie opening might have you think, I want to see what's going to happen. A cold opening might have you think, I want to know what's going to happen or what's going on. A hook has the same goal as a cliffhanger. In fact, the only difference between the hook and a cliffhanger is that one's placed at the beginning of the story and the other is placed at the end. For this opening, if you didn't think, I want to know what's going on, the hook failed. If you did, the hook did its job. Secondly, the opening image established several tones. It started off peaceful, as you can see here. Something unexpected happens, as you can see here. And then there was death, as you can imply from here. This sets up the story's foundation as if to tell you, hey, there's going to be some peaceful times, unexpected things might happen, and don't be surprised if people die. So far, there's action and violence. You don't have to do this. I know there are some openings that will seem to be one thing, but there is a twist and ends up being another. That is totally fine as well. Anything goes in fiction. What's important is that you know what does what. So therefore, when you are implementing a strategy or a tip, you know why you're implementing it. So anything goes, just make sure you understand what is happening and why something is happening. So opening image sets the tone, it sets what might be expected, and this is a cold opening, so we don't know what is going on beyond this at all. This video does assume that you've seen the episode, so ideally you'd already know everything that's going on, but if you haven't, or if you can try and recall the first time you watched this, ideally you should be wondering what's going on, what just happened, why did this just happen? So, and then we're moving on to the second beat right after this. So second beat, the setup. Usually the first 10% of the story, including the opening image beat, so the setup includes all of this as well, it sets up the protagonist and their world, showing their day-to-day life. The setup also often shows or tells what the protagonist wants and their flaw or flaws if they have multiple ones. So, immediately after the cold opening, we're given some explanation about the opening. I'll scroll down. Right there should be good. A diplomat of a country named Westalis was in that car. The group we see, known as Wise, believes it was an assassination by the political party of another country called Ostania. Wise wants to know what Ostania is up to, and so Wise decides to send in their best spy, codenamed Twilight. So the setup after the opening image continues on with explaining what just happened, what we just saw, and again, explaining every little thing I just summarized, what they want, what is stopping them, and then their thought of how to move forward. This part is part of the setup. Let me try and scroll down. So, although that scene was just part of the setup, let's stop and analyze what just happened. The setup of the setting. Nothing happens nowhere. Additionally, people are in some way byproducts of the setting they're in. By focusing on the setup of the setting first, it makes the setup of the main characters easier to understand when we get to them. So, what's been set up so far in the setting? world details. Some stories start at the top, creating the big picture and then focusing on smaller areas of interest as they become relevant. And some stories do the reverse, focusing on a small area, then revealing more areas as they become relevant. Spy Family does the former, explain the political situation between two countries called Westalis and Ostania. Although it's a small and simple explanation, every line about this had a purpose. The first two lines explain the opening image, fulfilling the answers to most of the 6 W's about it. Who, what, where, why, and how. Only when is left out. Who's involved? Westalis' ambassador. What happened? Westalis' ambassador died in an accident. Where? In Ostania. Why? A possible assassination by one of Ostania's political parties. How? The car brakes were tampered with. This begs the question, why was he assassinated? The next line immediately answers that. Ostania is plotting war, or so we're told. We, the reader or viewer, are told. Although this thoroughly answers the question the opening image imposes, what's going on? All this thoroughly answers the question the opening image imposes, what's going on. The fourth line sets up this group's want and problem. They want information, but said information isn't expected to just be handed to them. The last 3 lines set up how they plan on getting it, using the best agent they have named Twilight. So, the last line is Twilight part of this, but I would try and keep it here for the moment. Just know that the last line of this all is Twilight. And then we should put him on it, the best agent we have. I am not sure if I can. There we go, perfect. The last 3 lines also serve as a beautiful lead-in into the setting up the protagonist. So, in the next scene, we see a spy hand off pictures to a burly man with the intent of forcing the foreign minister in the pictures to resign. So we'll scroll down. So it begins with a scene of an alleyway with nobody else involved. And then we see some kind of handout going on. So the burly man resigned. Only after the burly man drives away in the car and a look-alike of the burly man appears asking for the same thing do we realize that the spy was fooled by another spy. And that spy, ripping off his mask and changing his getup, is our main protagonist, Twilight. So we might be led to believe that this gentleman here is Twilight. Why? Because his physical appearance is of a spy archetype. You have the fedora, you have a jacket, you can see the hat trying to cover his eyes. So you're trying to cover yourself up and make yourself be either low profile and or just cover up what your profile is. And we see, just as I promised, photographic proof that the foreign minister wears a headpiece, negatives and all. And then this should be enough to secure his resignation. So this line would imply that all of this going on is to get this gentleman here to resign. And then after the handoff has happened, somebody drives away in the car and see the spy walking away. Keep up the good work, his job is done. It's hey, where are you going? Aren't you going to hand over what you promised me? It's the same burly man. And so we have the person we believe is Twilight, ideally, being confused. And then we realize with this gentleman, ideally, that he was fooled. Oh no, this was a setup. And then the narrator takes over, codenamed Twilight, as he rips off his mask. This man was a spy. And it turns out this is Twilight. So, let's move on. Before we go into this part of the setup for the protagonist, Twilight, allow me to call your attention to something. A pattern just repeated itself. A cold opening followed by an explanation to that cold opening. We saw some sort of exchange go down without context, then we were explained what just happened. Twilight, who stole evidence, the what, to prevent the foreign minister from resigning, why, by disguising himself and tricking the informant that he's someone else. How? It's literally show and tell. Show what's going on, then tell what's going on. So to explain that further, we start here with the show of the scene of Twilight. We see what happens. There's a trade-off, and this gentleman is fooled, and we are probably wondering what happened to this gentleman, and then we are told what happened. So we saw what happened, and then we're being told by explanation that this gentleman is Twilight. And then again, here, in an era which the nations of the world were waging a fierce war of information just out of sight, he was a veteran of the battlefield, employing 100 different faces to survive. And you can see the face he implemented to survive as he is ripping it off. So, all right, so back to the Smooth Criminal. What has been set up here? Firstly, Twilight's Save the Cat moment. A Save the Cat moment, coined by Blake Snyder, is a moment that shows the character is worth rooting for, and arguably to be worth rooting for is the best hook of all. What makes a character worth rooting for is a character who is admirable and or intriguing. And how do we make a character who is admirable and or intriguing? Positive traits or strengths. We all want positivity in our lives. We want to have positive people in our lives. And so we will root for positive people and want to get to know them. Therefore, a positive trait or strength, especially when it's put in a good light, gives us a reason to root for a character and get to know them. Twilight is a spy who can convincingly pass himself off as somebody different, not only personality-wise, but also physically, using disguises and altering his voice. Ideally, you should have also been fooled by Twilight, thinking he was the first spy and not in disguise, and if you were, the more credibility to his ability. In the car, we see how effortlessly he changes from one disguise to the other. I can actually just show that right here, as he puts on his glasses, or in here, he just rips off the mask, or he begins ripping off and then throws the mask away, like it's time to move on. Finally, we've been told he's the best agent Westalis has and that he survived something of a battlefield, or in other words, the field. He's a field agent. Considering all those details collectively, we can naturally assume Twilight's a professional at being a spy, and that's his positive trait. It's due to this professionalism as a spy that he was able to save Westalis' foreign minister from being forced to resign and make it look like your average Tuesday. Sick. So, actually, I think that explains everything. I'll just carry on. Okay. Secondly, even though this is a fictional world, the technology and fashion and whatnot should seem familiar to you. And in case it's on the tip of your tongue, allow me to spell it out for you. It's reminiscent of the Cold War era between the USA and Russia, even down to the political tension of a potential war on the horizon. Although mirroring a part of history sets up certain expectations of what's possible and what's not, in the same breath, it allows for very quick world building. Although this might be silly to point out, we don't need to be explained what a car is because its invention has been around longer than any of us have lived. We naturally know what it is and what it does. Same thing as with the oil lamp we saw earlier. Again, this script is based off the anime. I was having copyright problems, so I just kind of swapped to using the manga here. In this panel right here, when they go from seeing everybody gathered around to seeing the map, there is an oil lamp in the image, and it would indicate that they're not simply using a lamp, like a electronic lamp like I have here, but rather a lamp that requires oil that you light. So electricity isn't necessarily the top thing. Or it is, but it's like oil lamps can still be used with genuine purpose. Same like the car here. the car has a, if you can see it clearly. Oh, we can actually just go to the first one as well. Or maybe not. In the anime, but this car is very, it's not 2000s. It's not modern. So you know you're living in it's a time period that's not modern age, essentially. And hopefully you can kind of get the gist of it from this car. He's not wearing a seatbelt. It's one of those where it's like there's no space in between right here, as in modern cars do. It's just all one seat, and ideally in the back as well. So in the same way as with the car and lamp, we, the viewer or reader, are cross-referencing what we ourselves know about the Cold War era with what we see. If what we recall lines up with what we've seen or been told, we don't question it. We assume it's true and roll with it. So therefore, is a world like this believable? Yes, because this setting setup already existed at one point. Again, especially with this explanation right here, this is very similar to the Cold War, and so is some of the technology. So between this information, spies, and the technology you can see, you might be able to guess that the setting is similar to a Cold War, and therefore, if you know what the Cold War is in that time period, your brain starts to fill in the gaps of what it may be like. So in the same way, you don't need to be told what a car is because you just know what a car is since you've been born, ideally. You don't need to be told perhaps what Cold War era is if you are reading this at a certain educational level of knowing what a Cold War is. What is that talked about? High school, maybe? Yeah, and if you don't know what Cold War is, internet's there, just one search away. It's one Google search away. So, moving on. In the next scene, we see Twilight in the disguise of Robert, apathetically listening to the date named Karen. I could just show that right now. Right here. From Karen venting her stress out, we know she is the daughter of the man Twilight just stole the pictures from. After Karen and Twilight witness a marriage proposal, piquing Karen's interest in the subject, Twilight coldly dumps Karen and leaves. So, all this here. That's the marriage proposal that they see. Karen is thinking, do you suppose I'll be us one day? Twilight, 3 words. Or you can start here. Let's break up. 3 bubbles, I should say, not 3 words, 3 bubbles. Let's break up. Your conversation suggests a limited intellect. Best of luck in your future endeavors. That's it. In the next panel, he's already out the restaurant. He just literally said, let's break up. I'm out. Peace. Goodbye. We get these lines as he burns the evidence he just nabbed. Now I'll just scroll down for it right here. Quote, sorry, Karen, but I have no further use of your family. Marriage, unconventional happiness. I got rid of those aspirations as well as my identity the day I became a spy. It's a bit different here. Again, I was using the anime, but same concept. So the idea is he just got rid of all when he was a spy. This is the last part of the setup, or the setup beat. Twilight's flaw. Flaw humanize characters, making them relatable and making us care for them when we learn what hurt them. Additionally, it's also something to overcome so they can grow. So they can grow, which just makes us happy to see. Another way to think of a flaw for Save the Cat is like a barrier, blocking off the protagonist from getting into Act 3. We'll get to the details of Act 3 later. If there's ever a chance for the character to truly get what they want, they need to look the flaw straight in the eye and rectify it. Tear it down. So what is the flaw? Twilight has a callous, that's the word that describes this flaw, a callous attitude towards others. Despite saying sorry to Karen, there was 0 remorse in that breakup. Like, I'd be seeing the bottom of a few pina coladas if that happened to me. I would genuinely be seeing the bottom of a few pina coladas. Yet there was not a show of any emotion as Twilight got up, grabbed his things, and left. Which leads us to be more specific with the flaw for the episode. Twilight sees the relationships he creates with others as a spy as a means to an end, superficial and nothing more. We can see that right here. I'm sorry, Karen, but I have no further need of you, or rather, your father. So he wasn't even using Karen for so much as Karen, but rather the father. She was just a bridge. It is time to say goodbye to this Robert disguise too. So that it would imply that this thought is connected to that he no longer needs the Karen, he no longer needs the father, and therefore he no longer needs the disguise. If it helps complete the mission, it's implied he'll do what he must, including fooling others to get close to them, manipulating them for his needs, and then discarding them when he's done, as we've seen there. One could say that, in his own way, Twilight is a gold digger, but rather than getting into relationships for money, it's for information that's worth a good sum. That flaw is going to be a pain to hurdle over if he needs to have a relationship that's more than superficial. Now, although the third beat called Theme Stated is often in the setup beat, in this episode it's a bit further down. I'll explain all that when we get to it. So there would be a third beat in the middle of setup usually. Again, if you know what parts of literature are like the tips and tricks, like what is happening and why, what is doing what to what, if you understand like the cause and effects basically of implying or implementing techniques in literature, you can break the rules. If you understand the rules, you can break the rules. You can get away with breaking them and still have it work for you somehow. So third beat is later on. So we skip directly from second to the fourth beat, the catalyst. So usually placed no further than 10% of the story, the catalyst triggers the plot. Something happens to the protagonist that disrupts their status quo and begins to change their life. If said event doesn't happen, the protagonist and their world doesn't change. You know if an event is a catalyst or not, because if the catalyst never happened, the character would just carried on living whatever life you were just introduced. So I'll work my way down to the catalyst. So you see Twilight sit down. He exchanges newspapers with a gentleman. You see Meow, and you can figure out that Meow is some kind of cipher for what kind of code. So Twilight starts reading the newspaper. He is rewarded, like, excellent job. And he is already immediately given his next assignment. And I summarized the next assignment, but I can just scroll down from here. Your target is the leader of the National Unity Party, Donovan Desmond. He is a grave threat to the truce between the East and the West. Westalis and Ostania, essentially. Westalis is the West and Ostania is the East. Your mission is to get close to him and probe into any seditious activities. In order to do so, you will marry and have a child. This is the catalyst, right here. The catalyst is delivered into 2 lines. Quote, your mission is to get close to him and probe any seditious activities. In order to do this, you will get married and have a child. And he spits his coffee. Good reaction. To summarize, I can just scroll down here, as I said. To summarize, Twilight's mission is called Operation Strix. It should be said, so it's not said here. It's said here, eventually. So, I'll scroll down later, again. To summarize, Twilight's big mission is called Operation Strix. Twilight needs to get close to an Ostania political party member named Donovan Desmond and find out what Donovan is doing. Ideally, if Donovan is plotting a war. Donovan only goes out in public to attend an upper class gathering with the other parents of his schoolmates. I believe that's, so that's explained right here. To do this, Twilight needs to get married, have a child, and have that child go to the same school. All within a week. Simple. Not easy, but simple. Yeah, this is it right here. This is basically the catalyst. And And in my opinion, personally speaking, some of the best plots tend to be simple but not easy. So I just love this plot setup. Just refresh your memory of what each of these words mean. Simple is simply 1 plus 2 equals 3. That's simple. Or another example that's simple but not easy is to jump off a skyscraper and survive. Simple. It's not easy to do that, but you could just simply describe what's going on in one sentence. If somebody, if you're into like some drama show or some reality TV and you ask what's going on, if it could be explained in like one sentence, one very small sentence, some guy needs to jump off a cliff and survive. Can he do it? That is simple. That is simplicity. It's not necessarily easy, but it is simple to grasp the concept of and understand. One sentence, you got the gist. You can follow along with what's going on in the show. So again, the catalyst is simple. You will marry and have a child in order to get close to a gentleman with any seditious activities. Simple. Not easy, but simple. So, this is a good catalyst. Firstly, the catalyst goes completely against the character's flaw. Within the setup, Twilight just said how marriage was an aspiration he didn't need. Now suddenly, he needs to do it. Additionally, and more importantly, it's disrupting Twilight's status quo. As we've seen thus far, he for the most part works alone and keeps his relationship short. To commit to this mission would be to commit to simply having to be with other people rather than work alone. So, again, in this one right here. Hopes of marriage, the joys of ordinary life, those joined my ID papers in the rubbish bin on the day I became a spy. Few panels later, you will marry and have a child. His flaw is how cold he is and he just doesn't get into relationships. The exact opposite, the worst case scenario for this character happens as a catalyst for this character, what he needs to do. This is why I love it so well. Not only is it simple, it goes 100% against the main character in terms of his flaw. So, the fifth beat is called the debate, or as I sometimes nickname it, talk and stock. So usually from the 10th percent to the 20th percent of the story, the debate shows how ready or not the protagonist is or becomes for Act 2. The protagonist decides whether to enter a status quo they're unfamiliar with. So his initial reaction for the debate, this is where the debate begins. I have 7 days to make a child, as he rips his new paper. That funny stuff. And we carry on. So, to paraphrase, he flat out rips the newspaper as he thinks out loud. How in the world do I do that, basically? This debate is simple, short, and sweet. Although it's not said, since the catalyst isn't necessarily forcing Twilight to do anything, the debate topic comes as a question. Should I, Twilight, accept this mission? Twilight is stressed about what the mission entails, and who wouldn't be. But the rest of the debate is done by whoever is giving Twilight the mission. They employ persuasive rhetoric, as one does when trying to convince somebody to do something. So basically, the rest of the debate by the other guy is this, all of this. And then, real quickly, never forget that everyone else's day-to-day lives are possible because of your blood and sweat. I'll come back to read that again, but the rest of the debate happens in these panels right here. They remind him of the stakes, they empathize about what it means to be a spy, and then remind him of the fruits of his labors of being a spy, especially with its last sentence in camera shot. Let me scroll down again for that camera shot. Never forget that everyone else's day-to-day lives are possible because of your blood and sweat. And this is an image of everybody's day-to-day life, which is you have a happy family right here. You have a happy child, a happy mother, a happy father. You have a gentleman amazed as he looks out the window, and then you see like a happy conversation going on across from Twilight as he reads this from the newspaper. Although debate sections are usually 10% of the story by the Save the Cat plot structure, and those 20 seconds round up to only 1%. So again, this script was based off the anime, and the anime, all of this happens in 20 seconds. 20 seconds of that anime is 1% of the entire episode. And more or less, this is 1% of the entire chapter. So you have the debate section that quickly tussles whether the main character wants to engage or not. And it's literally all this right here. It's literally just like that. So a debate doesn't have to be drawn out for minutes. It doesn't have to be a character struggling, thinking so hard, whether he has to go on this quest to like save a princess or to save a kingdom or to get a job promotion, or whether he can handle a job promotion, or whether somebody should stick with a lie or something. It doesn't have to be so drawn out. It's literally the explanation of whether you should or shouldn't. It could come from somebody else. It could just be just like that. So, still do what I need to do. Imposed. All right. Yeah, so all the debate sections are usually 10% of this, or 10% of the story, while they save the cat plot structure, and those 20% are rounded up to only 1%. It still did what it needed to do. Impose a question, although indirectly, that, if accepted, would change Twilight's status quo, showed Twilight's reaction, and showed the talks that led up to his decision. And the break into two is simpler, shorter, and just as sweet. So, beat 6. So, breaking into 2 is the beginning of Act 2. So, beat 6, breaking into 2. That's the name of the beat. So, breaking into 2, usually at the 20th percent of the story, the protagonists commit into entering the new world, as described in what is Act 2. As the name of the beat suggests, this is the starting line of Act 2. Again, it's in the anime, it's literally even shorter than a debate. So the break into 2 is, I can just simply read it. Okay, fine then. I abandoned my identity when I became Twilight. A father is just another role to play, and I will play it to perfection for the sake of a better world. That is the break into 2. Those 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences is all break into 2 for this episode. Just as that. Simple, short, sweet, impactful though. And we're going to study how. So, several things were accomplished in those few seconds for the break into 2. So, 1, the acceptance of the mission. That's an internal break into 2. The challenge is accepted, and it's time to start committing. He's calmed down. He's not reacting like this. He's not like this anymore. He's calmed down, thought it through, he was reminded of what it meant to be a spy, and now he's calmly accepting the new mission. So that is the first thing. 2, there's a physical break into 2. Lloyd is entering a new place, a new world, a new act. And we see it from a sky view of Twilight riding a train into the new town or city or whatever that is. Whatever settlement you want to call this. Town, city, a village. I doubt that's a village. You get the gist, right? So there's a physical break into 2. I'll just say that. There's a little physical break into 2. Not all stories have a literal physical break. If you want to try and think of movies or shows that do have this, a lot of adventures do. Adventures as in the character needs to travel from their home to go from one place to another to accomplish something. A lot of adventure shows are literally go here and do this before the time limit is up or something bad happens. You can summarize a lot of adventure shows or plots with just that kind of concept. And so the moment the character leaves his home starting point, whatever that might be, a village, a city, a town, and goes out and beyond, that is a physical breaking the two. And that's usually also the telling point of the breaking the two for the save the cat plot structure. So you know you're beginning Act 2 now. And then 3, Twilight's want for the sake of a better world. His own goal, his desire. A want or desire is what drives a character to act. Although the protagonist's wants and motivations are usually introduced in the setup, there's no definitive time to tell them. Sometimes a story might just start you off in the middle of things, usually the fun and games beat, which I'll describe later, where you just go with the flow. When in Rome, do as the Romans. The protagonist's wants and motivations are usually then revealed later as that information becomes relevant, sometimes as a flashback. So this is me referencing stories where it's quite the cold opening. You're just thrown into some scene, you see something go down, you don't know what's going on, and then later throughout the show, you figure out how the world works. An example of this, well, it's hard to just think of examples because there's so many shows that do this. But generally speaking, if there's a TV series, this is probably like the best type of example. Some TV shows don't really start you off at the beginning of when all these relationships formed, why somebody's a best friend, maybe somebody's first day of school. They eventually explain that in a further episode in a flashback. So it could be appropriate to reveal why characters are later on and just simply start the show with the fun. Like if you want to write a show about fantasy and slaying monsters, you can just start the show with a group of people trying to slay monsters for whatever reason, and then later on delve into the backstories and motivations of characters. You don't need to know why somebody's doing something to begin with, as long as eventually you find that out. Eventually. So, in that sense, we might not know what makes a character tick until as late as the Dark Night of the Soul, as one of the beats are called, and that is completely fine. Obviously, it's just important to eventually know their wants and motivations, and it just so happens Twilight's want is told in this beat. I'm going to turn on the light. Hold on. Adjust my light here. That's much easier on the eyes. How's that looking at my camera? That still looks satisfactory. Nice. Okay. I'm also grab some water. Water break. All right. Does this show me how long I've been recording? It has 43 minutes. You know what? I'm actually going to just wrap it up here. So, I remember when I was in high school, classes were, how long were classes? They were roughly like 50 minutes, 53 minutes. In my high school, we had a passing period that was 7 minutes that allowed you to get from one class to the other. So, yeah, 53 minutes, and I don't want to just throw everything into just one video. How far are we? We are page 10 of 43. There's still so much to go, so I'm going to stop here, but there is one thing at the end that I want to end with, rather than just a plain stop. I want to end with the prompts I have. All right, so, what good is information if one isn't prepared to use it? So I've come up with some exercises geared towards topics in this video analysis to help you implement some ideas talked about into your own story writing. Ideas you can implement into your own story writing talked about in this video. So, 1. Think of a prompt with the main character's strength and flaw or flawed habit being at total ends with the catalyst. In this episode, Twilight needed to make a relation with another person and maintain it, contrary to his flawed habit of cutting off relationships and contrary to his strength, where he couldn't fool anyone or being a child for the mission. That's talked about later on. Maybe this is probably too soon. But you can at least start with thinking of a character flaw, and then whatever that character flaw is, literally just make the catalyst, the scenario for what the character needs to do, their worst nightmare. So if a character is, let's say, a character is shy, make their catalyst, they have to give a speech in front of an entire crowd of the school. Let's say you're like the main character is a schoolmate and they're shy and they're very introverted, having trouble making friends. Make up some scenario where whatever happens, for whatever reason, they got to give a speech. If they don't give a speech, something worse is going to happen to them, as they already are now. There's like a net negative if they don't make this speech. That is a perfectly okay and I think good prompt for like this kind of example. Or you can come up with your own. And then 2, think of a country that is reminiscent of a real world culture down to its technologies and customs, period. That's probably supposed to actually be a period right there, not period. Now, give it random geology from the country size and its shape to its seasons, plants, and animals. In this story, Ostania is seemingly based off Cold War America, but it is its own fictional country. So, come up with I was thinking fantasy, because again, this world, it's not Earth, but it's Earth-like. So, what concepts of Earth are the same? And then again, this video assumes you've seen the episode already. So, assuming you've seen the episode already, you know that Anya is a telepath, and that is a supernatural. And depending on what you might believe, that is fictional. Supernatural powers are fictional in our world. So, come up with a world, like concepts that you might like or you're familiar with by yourself, but just add something, a hint, a splash of supernatural, like a splash of magic, just something small. It doesn't have to be big. That will probably be the 2 easiest prompts to think of and try for yourself that you can learn from what we've talked about so far. Next video, I'm going to go more into the second act. The second act is the good chunk of the story. I would say it's 3/4. Definitely more than half for sure. So the second half might be split into, the second act 2 might be split into 2 videos. I don't know yet. I just want to make sure every video is at least within 50 minutes, give or take. So with that said, thank you for watching. Hopefully you've learned at least something in terms of writing, whether it's identifying a character flaw or their save the cat moment, as it's called by the Save the Cat. I actually didn't show this book. I could probably show this. Let me just turn off the light so there's just no glare. This is Save the Cat writes a novel. So there is Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, and that is for screenplays. This author by Jessica Brody, she takes the Save the Cat and converts it into novels. So you can very well use this book and describe or identify what I'm doing right now, because that's what I'm doing. Or you can use this book and read it and like identify story plots for other episodes, stories, essentially. So this is the prompt for the Save the Cat that I use. Or you can use the screen right. Yeah, so hopefully you were able to learn what is being implemented in the first part of Spy Family, learn the simplicity, learn how you can, what I've identified, and therefore by understanding what I identified, you can use it for yourself. And hopefully by the end of it all, and perhaps in like the next future minutes, hours, or days, you can make these prompts yourself that I have here and be able to have some ease in doing so, because you can reference what I've talked about in the story. So again, next video to be made, we'll talk about Act 2, what all of Act 2 or not, don't know yet. But at the very least, everything I've talked about so far is Act 1. All of this from here all the way up. I'll probably go down more slowly. All this is, we'll just go all the way to the top. All this is Act 1 of the episode. Now, part of me is not going to do this again, but I feel like since I've already started it, I just kind of gotta let it finish till I get to where I was. Act 1. This is all Act 1. There we are. So, next video, Act 2, beginning of Act 2. Until then, have fun with your day, enjoy your day, stay safe, peace, good writing to you all. Oh, what the